This is the ultimate guide to caffeine for entrepreneurs. Sip or skip? We shall find out what is best for you in this video. Why listen to me? Well, 6 years medical school, 4 years being a doctor, personal experience and passion in performance and health optimization, and I am an aspiring entrepreneur myself, so I'm applying my knowledge specifically to the lifestyle of an entrepreneur. What you will learn in this video, we will break down caffeine into its simple form. What is caffeine? How does it act in the body, in the brain? We will talk about the performance and focus benefits of caffeine, especially for online entrepreneurs. And we'll also consider the drawbacks and negative effects of caffeine. And we will talk about the alternatives. Can you achieve the same levels of performance and focus without caffeine? So, let's understand caffeine. Let's break it down simply. What is caffeine? Caffeine is actually a natural stimulant. It's most commonly found in coffee, tea, various other beverages and foods. It's even found in chocolate. It belongs to a class of components known as methylxanthines, and it's prized for its ability, obviously, to enhance alertness, focus, concentration. But this is all very temporary. It doesn't last forever, and there is a cost. We'll talk about that later. How caffeine works? Well, it's an adenosine receptor blocker. So it actually acts on our adenosine receptors and blocks it, just sits there and blocks it from the adenosine coming. And what does that do? Well, adenosine is a neurotransmitter that promotes relaxation and sleepiness. So, and this builds up the longer we're awake. Adenosine levels build up. And that's signaling the body to be sleepy, to go to sleep. So the longer you're awake, the more adenosine there is. What does caffeine do? It blocks that. It counteracts that. It means that we can temporarily slow down or block that feeling of sleepiness. So it's almost as if you were fully awake, aren't sleepy at all, because it's literally blocking those receptors. So in this way, caffeine helps to keep you awake and alert. It also releases other neurotransmitters. So these other neurotransmitters include dopamine, noradrenaline, or norepinephrine. This further enhances arousal, alertness, and concentration. We've talked about the sources of caffeine. Coffee. How much caffeine is in a cup of coffee? Typical 8-ounce cup of coffee is about 80 to 100 milligrams of caffeine. Tea has lower concentration than a cup of coffee, but notably, they still have a significant amount of caffeine. Energy drinks can actually have higher levels of caffeine than a cup of coffee, up to 300 milligrams for an energy drink. So very important to not overlook that. Okay. Even soft drinks have caffeine in them. So how does it work in the body? Once you do ingest it in the mouth in a drink, you're going to need to absorb it. How long does it take? How long does it take to get into the bloodstream and to act in the brain? So after consumption, caffeine is rapidly absorbed into the bloodstream with noticeable effects typically within 30 to 60 minutes. It differs from person to person. For me, I would definitely notice it after half an hour. The half-life is important consideration as well. Half-life is basically the time it takes for your body to eliminate half of the ingested amount. So for caffeine, it is about 3 to 5 hours. What does this mean? It means if you have caffeine at 4 p.m., in let's say 4 hours later at 8 p.m., you're still going to have half of the amount of caffeine acting in your body. And this is very important if your sleep time is meant to be 9 or 10 p.m. You're still going to have the effects of caffeine in your body. So we'll talk about the importance of caffeine timing later as well. But of course, there is a individual variation. So factors such as age, your liver function, whether you're pregnant, whether you're on other medication, can affect how quickly caffeine is absorbed and metabolized, and also eliminated from the body. So the advice, really, if you are when it comes to caffeine, is that moderate caffeine consumption is completely fine. There is no long-term health effects associated with moderate caffeine consumption. That is generally considered to be safe. So this is about 200 to 400 milligrams per day. So that's potentially two to three cups of coffee a day, which for me personally I think is a bit much. I think it does vary person to person, but that is considered to be safe. That's not to say there is not going to be short-term effects like jitteriness, anxiety, and even addiction to coffee and coping mechanism to it. So even if that is considered to be safe in the long term, that may have other negative effects in the short term. So what are the potential downsides? We'll talk a bit more about this later, but excessive caffeine consumption can also lead to what I've just mentioned: jitteriness, anxiety, increased heart rate, digestive issues, and then obviously sleep disturbances. So understanding how caffeine works and its effects in the body will help you have these informed decisions about when to take it, how much to take it, what the benefits are, and what the negatives are. Is it worth it? So we will do that, and we'll focus that specifically on productivity focus of an online entrepreneur. Okay, so what are the performance and focus benefits for caffeine? Especially when it comes to an online entrepreneur, we want to have that focus. We want to be able to engage in that deep work, and caffeine can be the window for that focus. It has that well-known ability for that cognitive function. It's a very popular choice, especially for people like us who need to maintain high levels of mental performance and concentration. We've talked about why this happens. It releases those neurotransmitters, dopamine, noradrenaline, and it blocks those adenosine receptors. There's also some studies that suggest that caffeine can enhance both short-term and long-term memory as well. This can mean better retention of important information. And this is crucial for, obviously, strategic planning and decision making. It also, when you drink caffeine, you're more alert, you have faster reaction times. So, you're going to be moving faster, faster processing speeds, things like responding more quickly to emails, etc. It's very good for short little tasks, and a lot of them just to get through them, get through your to-do list. I find that drinking caffeine can really get me into that zone. And you will find that obviously there's a short-term burst in energy as well, which will just help with motivation and getting those hard, deep work tasks done. Now the question is that, does it sustain that amount of energy, or do you have a caffeine crash? And obviously with things like sugar, high sugar intake, you're going to have a quick spike and then a crash in energy level. And I talked a bit about that in my last video as well. But caffeine actually provides a more sustained increase in alertness, and it acts longer. So it helps entrepreneurs maintain a steady level of productivity throughout the day. That's not to say that a lot of people do experience this crash at some point from caffeine, especially if you drink a lot. You will experience that come down once your caffeine levels do decrease, and also your neurotransmitters then will decrease below your baseline as well. So you'll actually feel a bit worse than you were before. Mood enhancement, that's another important thing to talk about. Obviously this is crucial, not just for your work, but for your general well-being, and caffeine can certainly help with motivation, creativity, and overall work performance. especially if you're just feeling slow and groggy. It can really pick you up and carry you through the next few hours, especially in the hard parts of the day. So that's not to be overlooked. Again, one of the important neurotransmitters is dopamine, so that obviously is associated with increased mood and greater sense of well-being and motivation. Okay, so it can obviously, by increasing these neurotransmitters, it can make activities feel effortless, less effort required, and obviously this will help with productivity. So here are some practical tips just to maximize these benefits we talked about of caffeine while minimizing the potential drawbacks, which of course we'll talk about later, the drawbacks. So timing does matter. You can consume caffeine strategically. Obviously, it's not advised to consume caffeine before bed. You're gonna struggle to fall asleep. You're gonna be alert and active while you're trying to sleep. You want to have it early in the morning or early afternoon at latest. You don't want it to interfere with your sleep. Sleep is obviously the foundation for your energy. You want to maximize your sleep, so you're not reliant on caffeine. Caffeine should be a bonus. It should be a cherry on the top. You shouldn't be reliant on caffeine. And yeah, just by sticking to the timing rule, not having caffeine after a certain time, I wouldn't advise caffeine after 2 p.m. Then you can maximize the short-term benefits of it while when you go to sleep, basically having no caffeine in your system, and that's what you want. So moderation is key as well. You don't want to exploit caffeine. You don't really want to go above 200 or 300 milligrams per day. You don't want to go above 2 or 3 cups of coffee a day, I would advise. And that's because you don't want to have these negative effects of jitteriness and anxiety, and you don't want to be reliant on it. You don't want to have an attachment to caffeine, like sort of dependence on it. It's a drug, just like alcohol, just like other drugs, so it can be addictive and you can be reliant on it. And if you're just constantly finding you need and you crave that caffeine to get you through the day or to do that productive work, then that's the point where you're probably not just using caffeine, but you're reliant on it. So staying hydrated is key as well. Obviously, drinking caffeine is a fluid, and that's going to help with hydration, but it's also a diuretic. So make sure to drink plenty of water as well to stay hydrated, because caffeine will make you pee it out, so you will lose fluid. Okay, there is such thing as healthy pairing, so combining caffeine intake with healthy habits, such as regular balanced meals and regular exercise as well, is just going to support your general well-being. So I guess the key is moderation is key, timing is key, and not being dependent on it is also key. So by understanding and leveraging the performance and focus benefits of caffeine, we can enhance our productivity and achieve our business goals more effectively. Okay, so I mentioned about the negative effects of caffeine, and this is very important to consider. It can affect people more than others. People can really not like these effects. Some people can actually like this feeling and think of them more as positive effects, but it's very much worth being aware of. So these are obviously, first thing we talked about, jitteriness, anxiety, nervousness, and especially when there's periods where you need to feel calm, focused, think slowly, caffeine may interfere with that process and can actually go from having that performance enhancement effect to getting in the way of your performance, getting in the way of calm decisions, and making you potentially act more rash and fast when you just need to slow down, process the emotions. And physiologically this can affect your body with a high heart rate and increase your blood pressure as well. And for individuals with heart conditions or existing high blood pressure, excessive caffeine consumption can actually pose health risks. It can put your blood pressure up, and in those periods of time, obviously increase the risk of things like stroke and heart attack, in the short term. So that's just worth noting as well. Digestive issues, it can stimulate the production of stomach acid, which can lead to digestive discomfort, acid reflux, and exacerbate existing gastrointestinal issues. The other thing to note is caffeine generally makes your bowels more loose, as well. So impact on sleep we talked about. This is the most significant drawback, especially if you get the timings wrong. It means it can really interfere with your sleep, and obviously this is key for your energy levels, performance levels, far more important than caffeine in itself. So if you're not looking after this, if you're not getting the foundations, then you do not want to be trying to get that from caffeine alone. And it's not just about and it can even affect, so you might be okay at getting to sleep. There's people that say, I can drink coffee at 6 p.m, I can have a tea before I go to sleep, and I can sleep fine, but it actually does interfere with the sleep quality. It can result in feeling less rested and more fatigued the following day, and you might think you've slept okay the whole night, but the actual quality is being affected. Okay, so it doesn't just affect the duration of sleep, but it also affects the quality of sleep. Those are two big components of a good restful night. We talked about dependence and withdrawal of caffeine, and that's very important to consider. You can have a physical dependence to it, so you can start shaking if you don't have your cup of coffee, and you can have, become jittery if you don't have your coffee. You also have a psychological craving for it as well. You kind of just feel like you need it. And again, if our goal is freedom as entrepreneurs, we also want to apply that to our psychological selves as well. We want to be free from attachments, from addictions. We want to have a healthy relationship with caffeine, and we don't want to be reliant upon it. Over time, unfortunately, like any drug, it can have there's a very high chance of it creeping up on you and you forming a dependence on it. You may develop a tolerance on it, so you need more caffeine to have the same effect. And this can kind of creep up, and over time you've gone from 1 coffee a day to 4 coffees a day, and you're just trying to chase that feeling that you once had from 1 cup of coffee. So this will lead to increased consumption, and then obviously your health risks increase, or the negatives that come from it increase as well. So it's just very important to be aware of it. And then, of course, the withdrawal symptoms can also include headache, fatigue, irritability, difficulty concentrating. So if you are drinking it, it's very important to really just maintain that control over it and be aware of when you are reliant on it. When you are having cravings or withdrawal symptoms, maybe that's a time to kind of go for a period of detox or consider cutting down in the long term. Again, it's very important to understand these effects, the negatives and the positives, are an individual basis. So it's important to listen to your body, listen to your own response to caffeine. You can even go as far as journaling about it, how you feel on a certain day, how productive you were, how good your sleep is. You can pair this with sleep data to really have an informed decision. Is caffeine a good idea for me? What's the best time to have it? And is it worth it, considering the negatives? Okay. And if you're taking medications, of course, it's important to consider if there's an interaction with medications. These can affect your metabolism of caffeine and how long it acts for and things as well. If you're unsure or concerned, obviously contact your own doctor or GP. So practical tips, as I said, monitoring intake, being very self-aware, cultivating awareness, journaling, being aware of the timing, listening to your body. And if you are potentially realizing you're drinking too much caffeine, instead of just cutting it off cold turkey, it might be more wise to cut it off slowly, reduce the intake slowly, so you're prepared, you're adapted, and you don't get those severe withdrawal symptoms, and you can make a long-term change and not go back to caffeine when you feel really like you need to. Okay. And what about performance and focus without caffeine? If you do decide caffeine is not worth it, the negatives are to outweigh the positives, or I just want to have that ability to focus and perform without a external drug into my body. What are these alternatives or natural boosts in energy and focus? So the number one thing we talked about is adequate, good quality, good duration sleep. And this is going to be the single most important thing. If you have consistent, good quality sleep, this is the foundation of cognitive performance and the ability to focus, the ability to concentrate. That is just the most important thing. Obviously, we can talk about tips for this and how to get the best out of your sleep, but we'll probably cover that in a different video, or I think I've done a previous video on it. Regular exercise is another thing. This is another great natural way of boosting these similar neurotransmitters in your brain, dopamine, noradrenaline, and that can give you the same effect of this increased alertness as caffeine does. And not just that, but instead of just drinking a coffee, which requires little effort and relies on an external drug, you're actually going out, and it promotes physical activity, which is generally very healthy for you, has all these other benefits, but it gives you that same boost in alertness and feeling. And similarly, just like caffeine, it can last over a few hours, can last most of the day as well. And this can be cardiovascular, this can be running, this can be going to the gym, and again, whatever works for you. The other thing, having a balanced diet can also just maintain your energy levels, promote cognitive function and focus. Again, if you are really dialed in your nutrition, your physical activity, your sleep, you're going to be onto a winner. And you might find you just don't have any cravings for caffeine, you don't have the need for it, you're able to sustain that focus by yourself. And I think that's the goal. For me personally, that's the goal. I've cut out caffeine for I think over a year now, and I'm not looking back, because it allows me to focus on these other three important things and really optimize them. I'm not, every time I feel like I don't have the energy or I can't focus, I don't just have a short-term fix. I have to actually work my way through that. I have to take the short-term hits, and I have to just think, okay, what can I do better, and why am I feeling low in energy? And it might be a case of, okay, I need to sleep better, I need to exercise better, I need to eat better. And if you don't have that short-term crutch to go to, then it really promotes that long-term improvement in those three things. The fourth thing would be hydration. So just making sure you're well hydrated, drinking lots of water, again, promotes that cognitive function and energy levels. And then I would say managing your stress levels, reducing that low through mindfulness, meditation, awareness, You want to keep your cortisol levels down. And this will again allow you to be more present in the moment, function better, feel less anxious. Again, that's going to be extremely important for cognitive function. And again, you might find you hit all of these things, you don't need the caffeine. Okay, now we'll talk about a little bit about natural supplements. So herbal teas, like chamomile or peppermint. These can provide a calming effect without the stimulating properties of caffeine. Even things like green tea, I think it has a small amount of caffeine in it, but can again have these similar properties, this calming effect, and you might find it has some focus benefits. Nootropics, these are things like so they can just improve cognitive function as well. So what are the benefits of caffeine abstinence? Is it worth it? Are there strong positives of just abstaining from caffeine in itself? As I said, in summary, better sleep quality, potentially, increased sleep duration, stable energy levels, so you're avoiding that crash, you're having more consistent energy, you're really relying on your natural rhythms, your natural energy levels. When you do feel low in energy, you are taking the time to recharge and not just powering through, and that's a really important thing to consider. You're more calm, potentially, reduced anxiety and jitteriness. You don't have to worry about that. And I think in the long term, you're able to self-regulate your mood better, rather than relying on these short-term hits and crutches. Your mood is more self-regulated and more stable. And if you're someone that does have heartburn and it's easily affected by caffeine, this can be improved by abstinence. You may find your acid reflux decreases or goes away with abstinence from caffeine. Also, a diet free from excessive caffeine can support a healthier gut microbiome. And I think there's just a psychological benefit of reduced dependence, which I've talked about, just having more autonomy. You reduce that dependence on external stimulants, and again, this can actually shift your mindset to other things as well. You can start to think, do I really need that much alcohol? I think it just promotes more autonomy in your mood and energy levels. And you start to look within. You start to think of the habits you can do to foster that focus without these external substances, and I think that's a cool mindset shift. And over the long term is definitely the best thing you can do. So, practical tips for reducing caffeine intake. If you do decide to reduce or eliminate, I think the gradual reduction is important. You want to start by cutting back on one or two cups of coffee a day. You could switch to decaf. This is something I've done. I think it's a very social thing. Having coffee, with your work colleagues, meeting a friend for a coffee, etc. Like it's a very hard thing to just say, I'm not doing that anymore. So what's the alternative? And I think that this is something I do. Decaf cappuccino, decaf flat white. It really tastes very similar. You get the same feeling of that warmth. You go to the coffee shop, it's definitely a good choice. It's worth noting that there's probably still small amounts of caffeine in these drinks, but very, very negligible compared to the caffeine alternatives. Staying hydrated, so drinking plenty of water can actually help flush caffeine out your system as well. And just focusing on the other habits to maintain your energy levels, your diet, your nutrition, your sleep, your exercise, and your stress levels. And I think just monitoring your progress, seeing how you go, seeing the benefits, tracking it, and I think just being very aware and very in control of your caffeine consumption is a very good idea. Okay, so yeah, just exploring these natural alternatives, this decaffeinated lifestyle, could be the path you want to take. And I think if you do want to take that, that's very worthwhile and very good in the long-term path to take. I think there's something very cool to not be reliant on a substance. So instead of wondering about all the specific tricks and tips and the timings of caffeine and how it can help, etc., it might be better to just switch your caffeine to a decaf and say, you know what, I'm going to learn all of the tricks and tips and tricks I can do myself to regulate my mood, to regulate my focus without the need of an external substance. And I think that's, very worthwhile. So ultimately it's your choice whether you want to keep utilizing caffeine in a healthy way, in a healthy optimizing way, which doesn't get in the way of your sleep and things. That's completely up to you. Or whether you want to completely eliminate it. But I hope this video has helped you make that decision, specifically for an entrepreneur who obviously wants to optimize that deep work, wants to optimize their focus and their productivity for their business. So hope that helps. See you later. Bye.